Your DRI International webinar begins now. DRI International's professional practices are the most used standard in the world, the heart of DRI's teaching, and the foundation for resiliency programs everywhere. This responsibility means they must be maintained and revised to address the latest issues facing the realm of business continuity. What does that mean to continuity practitioners? We're here to find out. Welcome to the latest in DRI's webinar series. I'm Russell Wooldridge, DRI Senior Director of Development. Events like these are a perfect way to join with a global audience to look at today's business continuity practices, how they have evolved, and where they're headed in the future. Today's speakers will touch on all aspects of the professional practice revisions. They come from a wide range of sectors and present a wealth of experience that can only be found among DRI certified professionals. They are Ray Seid, MBCP, Director of BC Service Delivery for McKesson. Michelle Turner, MBCP. She is a DRI instructor and a member of the DRI Foundation Board. Jenna Rodriguez, MBCP, Vice President of Risk Management for Global Payments Incorporated. Mike Genco, MBCP, Senior Director of Global Business Continuity for Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And from DRI International, to put our revised professional practices in context, President and CEO of DRI International, Al Berman, Executive Director, Chloe Domrovsky, and Marketing Director, Ingrid Che. After their presentations, we'll open the floor for a Q&A with the audience. Please use the question box in most cases at the bottom of your control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Simply type in your questions at any time during the presentations, address it to all panelists, and we'll respond to as many of them as we can during the question and answer portion. We also request that you keep your microphones on mute throughout the presentation, which can be checked by your name in the attendance screen in the right-hand column. Now let's hear from our panel of experts. First, we'll hear from Chloe Domrovsky, Executive Director of DRI International, on the value of certification. Chloe?
Thanks, Russell. Disaster Recovery Institute International is well positioned to understand the challenges facing the profession because we spend so much time with both public and private entities around the world, including on the international level. We can leverage that interaction to understand how standardization helps to support preparedness and then use that information to maintain the currency of the professional practices for business continuity management. As the nonprofit that helps organizations prepare for and recover from disasters, we are committed to developing world-class thought leadership, education, and accreditation in business continuity and related fields. DRI International now has more than 14,000 certified professionals in over 100 countries. On the international level, DRI has made inroads into the United Nations system in a variety of ways. DRI is a member of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction's private sector ARISE initiative that helps to improve cross-sectoral cooperation globally. We served on the International Chamber of Commerce Business and Industry delegation for the negotiations of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is the first major agreement of the post-2015 development agenda. All the signatories committed to 7 targets and 4 priorities for action to reduce the incidence of disaster globally. It was endorsed by the UN General Assembly in 2015. DRI also acted as a consulting expert to the UNISDR Science and Technical Advisory Group, as well as the European Commission on the UN's own disaster management terminology. We hold international organization observer status for ISO Technical Committee 292 for security and resilience. We have also conducted briefings and trainings for many of the international financial institutions and numerous central banks and stock exchanges. DRI is the only business continuity certification body recognized by the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. In Mexico and the United Arab Emirates, DRI has acted as an advisor to the government for the development of new national BCM standards. It was signatory to the Japanese Joint Declaration on Overcoming Future Crises with the municipal governments of both Tokyo and Niigata. DRI Singapore is the official BCM education partner for the government-sponsored Singapore Business Federation. We briefed the Science and Technology Minister of Malaysia on the value and importance of business continuity to their national advancement strategy and competitiveness. In the United States, DRI has conducted congressional briefings, chaired the Alfred P. Sloan Committee that drafted the framework for preparedness that has been the foundation for Title IX implementation, and has been a member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Homeland Security Task Force, the Council of Experts for ANSI-ANAB, the FEMA National Advisory Council Private Sector Subcommittee, and has advised the Special Assistant to the President for Homeland Security Standards Policy in the White House. We are an ANSI-accredited standards development organization. In addition to our work with international organizations and governments, we work with a broad variety of non-governmental organizations, professional associations, and industry groups across business continuity, risk management, and related disciplines. On the corporate side, 80% of Fortune 100 companies employ a DRI Certified Professional, and we have penetration across every industry vertical, from financial services to energy to healthcare to telecommunications. We also serve as a trusted industry source for the mainstream media and have appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, as well as on Bloomberg TV, Fox News, and MSNBC, among many others. An important part of providing these trusted services is the development and maintenance of the guidelines for building a world-class program. The Professional Practices for Business Continuity Management is a body of knowledge designed to assist in the development, implementation, and maintenance of business continuity management programs. It also is intended to serve as a tool for conducting assessments of existing programs. Use of the Professional Practice Framework to develop, implement, and maintain a BCM program can reduce the likelihood of significant gaps in a program and increase cohesiveness. Using the professional practices to assess a program can identify gaps or deficiencies so that they may be corrected. DRI makes both the Professional Practices for Business Continuity Management and the DRI International Glossary for Resiliency available as free downloads via our website. The documents are available in multiple languages, including Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Japanese, Portuguese, Spanish, and Turkish. We will discuss the relationship between these two documents and more at the upcoming DRI Thought Leadership Session at DRI 2017 in Las Vegas. Join me, together with the chairs of both committees, for an even more in-depth live discussion, including ways in which you can get involved. Speaking of, these practices would not be possible without the hard work and dedication of our Professional Practices Committee, the Review Committee, the Editorial Committee, our translators, and many, many others who contributed to this work. Thank you all so much for everything you do to make DRI the industry leader and advance the profession. Without further ado, I look forward to hearing from our industry experts about how they use the professional practices at their organizations.
Thanks, Chloe. Next up is Ray Side, MBCP, Director of BC Service Delivery at McKesson, and DRI Commission member, to tell us about the new additions to the professional practices.
Thank you, Russell. I'm excited to discuss the revisions of the DRI International's professional practices. As part of DRI International's ongoing efforts to maintain the relevance and utility of the professional practices, and extensive revisions of substance, form, and function has been completed. The goals were to provide information that would include advances in technology, cyber threat considerations, utilizing insurance as a risk transfer tool, strategies for manufacturing, supply chain processing, risk management concepts, and legal and regulatory concerns. In addition, the titles of two of the professional practices were modified to be consistent with industry and professional standards. Specifically, Professional Practice 2 was changed from Risk Evaluation and Control to Risk Assessment, and Professional Practice 5 was changed from Emergency Response and Operations to Incident Response. These new titles bring the professional practices in line with the terminology generally used by the majority of professionals and regulatory bodies. This aligns well with the generally accepted terminology. Revisions in the abstracts and details of the professional practices were made to align with the International Glossary for Resiliency, published and maintained by DRI International. I wanted to briefly highlight the new content of the professional practices, specifically in the areas of cyberterrorism, supply chain, manufacturing, regulatory, insurance, and risk management. Regulators have focused more efforts into ensuring organizations are prepared. The number of regulations have extended well beyond the original arena of financial services. In addition to requiring business continuity for organizations, there is a requirement to ensure resilience in supply chain vendors and suppliers. This expands the scope of analysis for business continuity professionals and is an important part of protecting organizations. not only from the inability to remain a viable entity, but also to protect the organizations from regulatory penalties. Now I'm going to talk about the revisions in Professional Practice 2, Risk Assessment, which introduced the risks associated with the non-physical aspect of cyber terrorism, a threat that will continue to grow and become a source of creating an inability to deliver goods and services. Including this threat and risk assessments will provide a more comprehensive and inclusive inventory of concerns for analysis. Next, highlighting revisions in Professional Practice 4, Business Continuity Strategies. Business continuity strategies must consider insurance coverage, as it may directly affect the amount of coverage for such areas as business interruption and contingent business interruption, which insures against a damaging incident to a supplier or customer. By accurately combining potential loss with the risk transfer mechanism of insurance, organizations may be able to save substantial amounts of expense associated with insurance premiums. This will provide a true ROI for business continuity. For the most part, business continuity professionals have focused on non-manufacturing strategies. The revisions to Professional Practice 4 introduces 14 strategies directly related to maintaining the ability to produce and deliver products during interruption. The strategies include an analysis of product production prioritization to substituting products to buying existing inventories from current customers. I'm looking forward to auditing my existing business continuity disaster recovery programs to the revised DRI International Professional Practices to see how the program measures up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Our next presenter is Michelle Turner, MBCP. She is a DRI instructor and a member of the DRI Foundation Board. She's going to give you an overview of the revision process. Michelle?
Thanks, Russell. Great opportunity for us to talk through the DRI Professional Practice Revision process. This process ensures that the information we currently have, the information that drives our certification areas, is up to date with the business continuity practices from any industry from around the globe. The DRI professionals associated with this process include those within the certification area, as well as those who have been directly engaged in strategic and other alliances for the organization. For this revision, we wanted to ensure that we not only spoke to key areas from a program initiation and management perspective, but that we also took a hard look at the risk evaluation and control just to ensure that we had key areas around the impact, the likelihood, and the level of management control that's required to identify and rate these critical risks that would be within any organization. In addition, when we speak to key areas from an emergency preparedness process, we do want to make sure that we start to focus in on those additional areas that should be included and be engaged in notification and other areas as a whole. So as you hear additional information from experts in these fields, you'll find that there are certain areas that they're going to focus in on that we've had to revise just to make sure that we are very clear and concise with our messaging. The key piece here is to ensure that all of the data is focused in on those pieces that would assist in developing a significant business continuity program, irrespective of the industry and irrespective of any place in the world that you may want to build your program. Again, these revisions are gathered from DRI professionals associated with the organization, but we've also had an opportunity to gather information from industry experts to really show how they can make it real for their particular organization. I invite you to listen through the rest of the webinar, hear some of the key changes that we've made for the professional practices, listen to these key areas as you go through, and develop your program within your own organization. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Now, here's Al Berman, President and CEO of DRI International. Al, what can you tell us about how these revisions impact DRI's courses and training materials?
What we tried to do at the beginning of this process was to be as inclusive as possible. And so we got an all-volunteer committee consisting of Michelle Turner, Ray Seid, and Harley Lemons, and myself. And this represented both the private and the public sector. And it was the objective of this group to make the first set of changes and to have oversight throughout the whole process. During this process, we reviewed all of the professional practices. We spent time together. We spent time on the phone and came up with what we had considered to be the best draft possible. To augment our process, we also had a review committee consisting of Don Schmidt, Harvey Batan, and Mike Morganti. And their objective was to make final comments on what we had done initially. After the review committee reviewed each of the practices and each of the abstracts and the introduction, they've made their final comments. At that point, the original committee made the final decision as to what we were going to do and what would be included. Once that was done, it was drafted and then sent over to the operational staff so that we could actually put in context all of the materials that we had considered, made sure that we did the translation for it, cleaned it up, came up with a new version of it, and that's the published version. It's important once we change the professional practices that we change the courseware that corresponds to it and that trains with it. So the BCLE 2000, the BCP 501, the BCP 601 will all be changed. And they'll be reflected in some of the practices that will be talked about as we go along. So, for example, business continuity strategies will include some insurance coverage and manufacturing strategies where it's professional practice too. Risk assessment will go into cyber terrorism and the threat it presents. There'll be also changes in professional practice 1, 3, 8, 10, to correspond to the things that we're training people on. So it'll include things like, again, cyber, supply chain management, supply chain threats, manufacturing strategies, regulatory compliance and standards, insurance, and risk management. And so as we revamp the professional practices and included those things that will make us far more current and far more effective, we're going to change the courseware. In addition to changing the courseware, we're going to change the qualifying exam. It will still be the same number of questions, 100, same amount of time. But included in that will be the new materials. Again, all of this will be available on the website, and so people can study from the website as well as take a class. And then finally, we're changing the master's exam for a number of reasons. One was to simplify it. 40 pages was a little difficult for a lot of people to read and really didn't help move forward the testing of masters. And so that will be changed as well. And so along with the professional practices, you will see a major change in our courseware, complete modernization, complete revamping, new videos, and again, more materials that are covered in the professional practices and the corresponding examinations.
To illustrate the various uses of the professional practices, here is Jenna Rodriguez, MBCP and Vice President of Enterprise Risk Management for Global Payments, Inc. Jenna?
Thank you, Russell. The value of DRI's professional practices is in a consistent approach and terminology for implementing business continuity programs within an organization. The BCM team within an organization understands how a BCM program should be managed and what elements are needed, and not just a plan, but a program. The professional practices can be used in creating the framework for a BCM program, writing the corporate BCM standard, business continuity plans, and disaster recovery plans. You can also audit your company and vendors' programs using the practices. In business continuity management, we also use the professional practices during interviews, making sure that applicants understand all of the different aspects of business continuity and can explain how the different elements come together to form a cohesive business continuity program.
Thanks, Jenna. Here with his vast experience with the professional practices is Mike Genco, MBCP, Senior Director of Global Business Continuity at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, and a member of the DRI Board of Directors. Mike?
Thanks, Russell, for that introduction. As you know, Goodyear's business continuity policy and organizational charter reference the DRI 10 professional practices. We actually developed our business continuity process over 10 years ago, and we've had significant benefit to our company, to our associates, and to our business contacts with our teams executing effectively during large-scale incidents. We developed an internal benchmarking process called Business Continuity Excellence. It consists of detailed questions referencing each of the 10 professional practices. It's our maturity model where we set targets, check on progress, and try to continuously improve on each of the 10 professional practices in all of our business units. Now, globally, we have over 100 major locations which respond to these excellent surveys, and the results are rolled up by region. We believe our success is partially due to making a commitment to a single standard. And as you know, NFPA 1600 contains the references to DRI's 10 professional practices. And we haven't varied from the focus on this with new concepts or new ideas in the past 10 plus years. Since we began Goodyear's business continuity process, I have become a member of the NFPA 1600 Technical Committee as a voting representative, and I'm also a member of the DRI Board of Directors. This is an indicator of our commitment to business continuity excellence and the belief that NFPA 1600 and DRI's concepts have contributed to our success. We do have a saying at Goodyear, although failing to plan is planning to fail, it's all about execution. And our execution has been quite successful and continues to be due to our alignment with both NFPA 1600 and the DRI professional practices. Now, there are DRI and BC management statistics that state the CBCP is the #1 most sought after business continuity professional certification in the industry, bar none. So this is based on surveys completed by multiple sources which indicate the employers see the business value in DRI certification. So per these surveys, what people who are considering getting certified appear to be doing is attaining the CBCP, since it provides value to both the employer and it gives support to effectively building and managing a robust business continuity process.
Finally, we have Ingrid Che, Director of Marketing at DRI International, with her findings on continuity practitioners' relationships with the professional practices.
Thank you, Russell. So for those of you who don't know me, I am DRI's Director of Marketing, and over the past year and a half, I've been conducting outreach to our DRI audience of professionals in the business continuity field. So that means all of you, DRI certified or not, to really help us determine what business continuity professionals and your organizations value and how we can best deliver that to you. In past surveys, many of you have consistently ranked the professional practices as one of DRI's strengths and most valued resource. And as we've heard on this webinar in particular, the professional practices are widely recognized and adopted framework used by many. As such, we are conducting a survey with global business continuity software providers to determine how their existing software aligns to the professional practices. This will be a great resource for those practitioners and organizations who may be looking for software options that follow the professional practices. So thank you again for your continued feedback, and I look forward to more going forward. Back to you, Russell.
Thank you for that analysis, Ingrid. Now to your questions. We're happy to answer as many of your questions as we can in the time you have left. If you have a question, you can type it at the bottom right hand of the window. Please make sure it's addressed to all panelists. Be sure that you use the question window and not the chat window.
And now we have with us Al Berman and Mike Genco to answer those questions. We get many of the same types of questions, and the most of those are about when will these professional practices be available for the public as well as certified professionals on the website and in wide circulation, Al?
By the end of the first quarter of 2017, the professional practices, the revised set, will be the new set of standards for DRI International. The reason for the delay is that we have to update all of the courseware, BCLE 2000, BCP 501, BCP 601 for the master's exam, as well as the revisions to the master's exam itself. So you can assume that we will announce the professional practices will be available right after the conference at the end of February 2017, and the courseware will start by the end of the first quarter of 2017.
Okay. Mike, here's a question I think you'll warm to. What do you see as likely future trends in the practices that as they need to evolve to address future revisions?
Hey, that's a great question, Russell. We believe the practices should be okay for a while. There's going to continue to be changing risk horizon, and I know that DRI follows and is committed to continuous improvement mindset. So as changes or improvements are needed for the benefit of our professionals, they're going to be made.
We have a number of folks that are enrolled in courses that are going between the end of this year and well into February. They are understandably concerned how this revision is going to relate to their training and their ultimate certification.
I think it's a really good question. By the time we update all of the courses in the examination, it will be the end of the first quarter of 2017. My suggestion is that if you're scheduled to take it using the old professional practices, that you do so and not change your plans. We are actually having a committee meeting while we're in Las Vegas for DRI 2017 of interested parties to talk about how the rollout should be, and also to talk about should we conduct a session or have a course or an online course to talk about the revisions as they're extensive. So that's evolving. But my suggestion is that if you have plans to take the course and the examination, you should do so.
I'd like to assure everyone that this is a standard revision to the professional practices. We do this on a 3-year schedule where we revise the professional practices, update them as new technologies and new processes become available. In no way does it impact your existing certification or change the requirements in any way. Now let's talk about some more substantive things, Al. One of the questions that has been asked that we asked Mike, I'd like for you to address that as well. What do you see are the likely future trends that the professional practices will need to evolve to address in the coming period?
I think like everything else, we evolve as dictated by such things as incidents. The increase in cybersecurity, cyber attacks have really caused us to spend more time with that. The need for supply chain, I think politically as well as pragmatically from a business point of view, supply chain remains a big advantage. Everybody uses supply chain. Big disadvantage, again, comes in the cyber field. So we will be spending more time with that. There will be a degree of regulatory changes. We meet with most of those bodies on a periodic basis. We're part of ANSI, we're part of ISO. We meet with the Fed, we meet with the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. We spend time with our overseas affiliates. So we're going to look at the regulatory environment. But I think from the point of view of what we've done, this is really leading edge. Most organizations, for example, don't include insurance when they start to look at their process. Real chance for certified professionals and professionals in general to bring in ROI by reducing insurance premiums to match them with risk. So this is really more leading edge than any other standard that we know of. But again, we stay on top of the issues. We meet with government officials around the world. And I think the only changes we're going to see after this will be dictated by circumstances and regulatory bodies.
Mike, you and I have talked a number of times about Goodyear's place and the fact that it's not just a manufacturer, but it's also a retailer. So not only do you have to respond to interruptions in your manufacturing process, but you also have a downstream that you're concerned about. So can you take a minute and give us a little more detail about how the professional practices have been revised to relate to supply chains better?
Another excellent question, Russell. You know, supply chains are quite complicated. As you said, it relates to retail as well. Once you understand the basics of who is involved, it does get simplified quite a bit. So supply chains involve the manufacturer, logistics, transportation. There's ports, customers, suppliers. It's multi-tiered entities. If each of these groups is committed to the BC process, steps are being taken for continuity of operations. We all need to take the first step in engaging everyone and making them a part of your planning, regardless of which group it is. If you take a snapshot of your supply chain, who are the teams who have some skin in the game, you realize that all 10 of the professional practices relate to them in some way. So you need to get into a discussion with each one of them. And this is going to take a little bit of time, but you want to coach them, you want to partner with them to improve their process, or you may be surprised to find that they may be a step ahead of you, and you can learn a few things from them as well.
But specifically, how do you get your retailers involved in this process?
Well, at Goodyear, you know, we do have a major focus on manufacturing because manufacturing does drive our company, but we have about 40% of our people working in non-manufacturing. That includes our retail operations, warehousing, other offices. So what we've done, and I've talked previously and at the DRI conferences about business continuity excellence, where we take our 10 professional practices and we do benchmarking internally as we break those practices down into components and we do our self-evaluation. Because retail may not be staffed the way our manufacturing facilities are staffed, they have less people, but they're doing a lot of things. We need to simplify everything that we do in manufacturing and downscale it in a way that the folks in retail, in logistics, in offices can do it as well. So instead of us having 10 professional practices with detail in each of those 10, asking them specific questions on an annual basis, we have a one-pager checklist that we use, and we survey our retail operations. We may not send it to every store, but we're dealing with district managers, regional managers, and they do an assessment of their footprint, the locations they're responsible for, and we're pretty much asking and sending the same message. How do you identify incidents and risks? What's critical to you, and what's your plan? And along the way, as we're asking these questions, we may know that the substance behind what they have in their BC plans may not be what we need it to be, but we're continuously making improvement. We're educating them on it. We're talking to them about who's responsible, what kind of training they do they identify risk, who do they contact, what's key components of their plan, et cetera. So we look at retail as being very important. It's a critical part of our operations, but we kind of simplify for that group what the expectations are, and we keep tracking their progress as well as we would our manufacturing locations.
So you mentioned your questionnaires, lists of questions that you ask people at all levels of the supply chain, and you build your plans based on those feedbacks. How does that lace up with lists of requirements that you can generate from the professional practice?
They're all tied back to the professional practices. So what we did for each of the 10 professional practices, we looked at what are the key elements that are part of that professional practice. What are the Goodyear guidelines and minimum requirements that we have in place already that we're asking them to validate that they have in place? And we asked them to provide a summary of what are the documents that back up what you're doing. So in essence, we're doing a mini audit of each of the 10 professional practices. Internally, we're asking our teams to do a self-assessment. In addition to that, we work with our internal audit teams as an external party. They're still Goodyear, but when they do their financial reviews of our operations on an annual basis, they will also look at select locations and spend a few hours with the BC contacts and whoever the head of the operations are, and then we get a summary from them, and we see if the external, although it's Goodyear, it's an external view of how we're doing our self-assessments, how accurate they are. And this lets us, in the global team and with our regional leaders, focus on where we see gaps, where we need to make continuous improvement. But it's all based on what drives us for success, based on our policy. Our organizational charter is compliance with the DRI 10 professional practices and NFPA 1600.
A number of people indicated that they thought that business interruption and contingency business interruption added to the professional practices made a lot of sense. We have had a couple of requests to discuss the extra expense insurance coverage. Has that been addressed well with the new professional practices?
Yeah, when you look at it, and if we didn't mention it, it was an oversight. We look at business interruption insurance and contingent business interruption insurance during the BIA process, where we're looking at the losses and the continuing fixed expenses, which are covered by both. When you get to supply chain, you get the contingent business interruption, affect somebody in your supply chain on the front end, i.e. those people who supply you with things, as well as your large customers. Extra expenses really covered in the strategy section of it, as there's coverage for recovery built into the extra expense policy. It's important that people understand the windows in which you can utilize that insurance and what the deductible is. Yes, it is truly covered in it. I think this is the first time anybody's actually talked about insurance and risk transfer in relationship to how business continuity professionals build and execute their plans.
There's another question here that I know that is near and dear to your heart, and that is, what other languages will we be seeing the professional practices released in at the end of February?
It's hard to say how far we are. We've already translated into Spanish, we'll have French, we'll have Portuguese. I think it's already been translated into Hebrew and Arabic. We will give people updates on it. I think we do 10 languages now. We'll probably be at 12 to 14 by the time we release it at the end of the first quarter. It's really a part of our practice. 40% of certified professionals reside outside of the United States. That number continues to increase. And so we certainly are up to the challenge of having international certified professionals be at the same level as the U.S. certified professionals.
So one of the things that we talk about is, we've moved away from using a term like disaster or single point failure. We talk in terms of incident, and we've changed one of the professional practices to reflect that. We're now calling it incident response. Why was that used as opposed, and you may not know the answer to this, but why was that particular term used, or set of terms, incident response, as opposed to incident management?
Well, good question, Russell. Let me just give you my thoughts on that. And we believe a sound risk management program can help reduce the number of incidents, but there are some incidents that can neither be anticipated or avoided. Therefore, if the entire organization has an incident response capability to detect incidents quickly, contain them, mitigate their impact, restore, and get the services back in a good manner, if you get them thinking incident response, we're already focused that we need to be engaged and ready to act. That's the way I look at it.
Okay. Lots of organizations are looking at enterprise risk management that folds a lot of different disciplines, including business continuity, disaster recovery, and risk management, into one overarching program. Are there any particular changes that relate to how the professional practices work within a framework of enterprise risk management activities and practices?
I think a lot of organizations are kind of wrestling with how to address the concept of emergency response, business continuity, risk management, enterprise risk management, and to have an enterprise risk management process in place, regardless of what you call it, is a very good thing. If you have a risk register, if you have everybody evaluating not only facility, operational, but financial, reputational, all the risks, it's more positive for the organization. Now, knowing that professional practice, too, with the risk evaluation, risk management, risk control, is our key tie to ERM. If you're implementing that somehow in your organization and you're having discussions and getting other groups involved, I think over time what it's going to gravitate toward determining who the key functional groups are that have a stake in ERM. And if you look at that, it has to involve risk management, has to involve business continuity. In many companies, it's going to be audit, it might be legal, it's going to be the financial team. If you can form some type of organization, a steering committee, where you get the right representatives of each of these groups involved, you've in essence put together an ERM process, but you're not calling it that. So I think if everyone takes a look and see if you're book smart, what they're telling you to do and what actually works in your organization, you're going to figure out how to do it. And I think that's something that applies to a lot of what we're talking about here, Russell, with the 10 professional practices. There's no perfect script written for you on how to adapt that in your organization. You need to figure it out, how to work it into your culture. I've been asked, what are the keys to having an organization succeed in business continuity? Really, two things you need: senior management support and funding. The senior management support is making sure that the right people step up at the right time and say the positive things about what you're doing. The financial support is having time, having people take courses, the 10 professional practices, certification. That shows that you have skin in the game. There's some commitment to do that. And if you can do that as a good starting point and get leadership and get people at all levels involved, you're going to have success.
We've heard that the new and revised professional practices are being aligned with NFPA 1600. What are the plans regarding the rollout of the new practices to Canada and Z 1600?
It's not exactly true that we're aligned to NFPA 1600. It's probably closer to the reverse. 4 years ago, NFPA 1600 adapted the professional practices to NFPA 1600, just like its professional practices are embedded in almost every standard around the world. As you know, it's the most used standard, And we've elected not to create a management standard, but to allow the professional practices to be part of all the other management standards so that we have much more influence in trying to create a singularity, if you would, about getting together on what common ground we all share. NFPA 1600, we do a course in NFPA 1600 just like we do in ISO 22301. I think that the alignment between Z1600, the Canadian version of PA 1600, is actually being worked upon. We have met with our Canadian counterpart as recently as last month. They already have a copy of the revised practices, so I assume that will be an internal discussion between NFPA 1600 and Z1600. But I think we will find that there will be some changes that will be caused by our changes.
Quality is a very important factor in everything we do for our companies and for our various organizations. How do you work the quality requirements that an organization like Goodyear has into your BCP framework?
You're right, Russell. Quality is one of our 14 tactical functions in Goodyear business continuity. And more importantly, it's a driving factor behind Goodyear making the best tires out there on the market. So we have our quality team engaged in ongoing basis in business continuity, and they've informed us years ago that the auto industry requests suppliers comply with ISO TS 16949. And specifically, this is a common automotive quality system requirement based on ISO 9001. All the customers are supposed to be engaged in it. And it talks about quality management system. It's providing for continual improvement, defect prevention, reduction of variation and waste. So part of this process is to make sure you can manage through emergencies and incidents. That is specifically called out in this ISO document. The point I'm making here is that many industries have been asking for how their suppliers manage risk, and it continues to be refined in a management process with common components in all industries. For us, the quality team is being engaged by our customers, other suppliers. I'm sure this is common out there everywhere. They may ask the question, how do you handle emergencies? It's trending now toward what's your business continuity process. So what we want to fall back on is having a process. Make sure it's tied back to the DRI Professional Practices, NFPA 1600, that you can show you have some structure behind it, that it's resilient, and that it's going to keep delivering value, and you can validate that, and it's going to help you in that ISO questionnaire.
I would like to ask a non-related question. It's not related specifically to the revised professional practices, but it is related to CEAPs. We've had a number of folks in recent months and on this webinar ask a non sequitur, and that is, what's the difference between for-profit CEAPs and non-profit CEAPs?
Russell, I think we've answered this question a number of times, but I'd be glad to talk about it. DRI International is not a membership organization, but we're a nonprofit organization. We don't have members. And so we rely upon those organizations that are membership organizations, and there are a number of professional ones, and I won't try to name them all because I'm sure I'll miss one. We also know that these professional organizations are having financial troubles. And so what we're trying to do is encourage people to join those organizations so that they can grow, be a source of meetings, a source of networking, a source of information exchange. And so what we did was we decided that in order to promote them, we would promote nonprofit organizations to, in fact, get more CEAPs, hoping to attract members and sponsorship. After all, something done by the Red Cross should be treated differently than something done for a for-profit commercial organization. And so our commitment to the nonprofit organizations was to try to induce membership and try to induce more sponsorship by increasing the number of CEAPs. And we are auditing those, and we think that this is a way of encouraging people to support those organizations that support the profession.
Excellent. As we often see in our webinars, the questions tend to fall in specific categories, and there are quite a few of those that quite a few questions about certain aspects of what we're talking about. But one of the ones that keeps coming in for you, Mike, is as a DRI certified professional and you as a representative of the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, can you get us a discount on a set of 4 tires for Christmas?
You know, Russell, that's a question I've been asked many, many times, and I'm going to be consistent in my answer here. And let me give everyone some good advice, and I hope they're listening. The best time to buy the best quality tires, which are Goodyear branded, of course, would be around a holiday, which is coming up. And right now we have Thanksgiving holiday, we have Christmas holiday, we have a variety of holidays coming up. Best thing to do is go to Goodyear.com and look up specifically what brand of tire you want to get. Goodyear will not only point you in the direction of what 3 or 4 tires they recommend, they'll also set up an appointment for you. They'll point you in the direction of a qualified installer. And in addition to that, if you buy it at the right time, you will get, naturally, you're going to get a Goodyear Visa card. You're going to get immediately, I think right now it's about a $150 discount. So the incentives are just endless. So I'm really glad you brought up this question, Russell.
Thanks for answering those questions for us today. You can learn more about the revisions to the DRI Professional Practices and add to your knowledge by coming to the DRI Professional Practices and DRI International Glossary of Resilience Thought Leadership session at our conference, DRI 2017 Las Vegas, on February 28th, 2017. The discussion will further explore the recent changes in the professional practices and bring attendees up to date on the direction of the International Glossary of Resilience. It will be led by DRI Executive Director Chloe Domrosky, DRI Commission Chair Ray Seid, and a conference favorite, DRI Glossary Committee Chair Bobby Williams. Come with questions. The format is participatory, and we want to hear what you have to say. For additional information on the professional practices and to download a copy for your own use, visit the link displayed on your screen. If you still have questions that we didn't cover, give us a call at 866-542-3744. A recording of this and all of our other webinars is posted on MyDRI. I'm Russell Wooldridge. This webinar has been a production of DRI International 2016, all rights reserved. Thank you for your attention.